This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to Spouses Talking Houses with husband and wife real estate team Jennifer and Brian Frost. Everything you want to know about buying, selling, investing, and owning property. So let's get real about real estate.
Welcome back to Spouses Talking Houses. He's Brian.
She's Jennifer.
And we are here today to get real about real estate. And our topic is going to be, how do you value land or a buildable lot? Which is a question that we get asked not only by consumers, but also by other realtors.
Sure. And how do we do that?
It's not easy. There's an art to it. It's not that easy. So before we get into that, though, I thought we'd talk a little bit about the realtor lifestyle. It took us all summer, but we finally took advantage of the drive-in feature of Tupelo Music Hall
In Derry, New Hampshire.
Yeah, which was great.
Yeah, it was a good time. A unique situation where they built a great little stage at their front entrance, and what they do is they put one car on every other parking spot, and they allow you to put out chairs on the adjacent spot, and it's all to promote the social distancing aspect. And then they have a what would you call it? A liquor cart?
They called it a booze buggy.
Oh, a booze buggy that drives around. You can order a drink, and you can also order food, and they bring it out to you. And
it was like a stretch golf cart.
Yeah, it was a great time.
Had a full bar on it.
It was great. It was great weather. So it was fun.
It was fun, yeah. And you pay by the car just like you would for drive-in movie. Yeah. And the smaller cars park in front, and then some trucks would park in the back and literally just drop their tailgates.
Right, or else put their chairs right up on the bed so they would have better viewing.
Right, exactly. So it was great, and it was great weather too.
Yep, yeah. Perfect.
So that's some innovation. Scott Hayward, who's the local, bought Tupelo probably like 20 years ago.
Yeah, that was a building I appraised probably 20 years ago when it was just an industrial building.
Yeah. So it was originally part of the Grey Goose in Londonderry, then moved to a different building there. Then Meredith sold it to Scott, and then Scott opened up in Derry, and really has a very nice venue. And they've got different configurations indoors too. So we love to go see music there anyway. It's local. They got some good acts. I also like the fact that I'm home by 10. The best part about the drive-in was that the show went from 5 to 6:30.
Yeah, I think it was only about an hour and a half show. So we saw Adam.
We were home by 7.
Is it Adam Ezra or Adam Erzer?
Adam Ezra Group, which is a local Boston band. So anyway, so it was a good time. We'll be back.
Sure.
We'll be back. So, all right. Now let's talk about the topic at hand, which is, how do you figure out what a piece of vacant land is worth?
Well, it really basically comes down to comparing it up to other similar lots that have sold.
And what you can do with it.
Exactly. Well, yeah, there's so many unique characteristics on each parcel that you have to take that all into account.
Yeah, and you also have to say, I'm going to put up a house that the whole house and land package is going to be worth, say, $700,000, and then be able to back out how you get there, and then what the land cost is going to be. So that's one way. And then the other way might be if the developer purchased the land and then had to put in money to get it to be a buildable lot, they may be coming at it from that direction, and the two numbers might not be the same.
No, I mean, they might be setting a certain price or value per lot that might not necessarily be market value if you actually went out there and did an appraisal of that particular lot. But it's working for them as far as... Yeah.
And right now, to develop a buildable lot is pretty expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The development and the road costs are much higher usually than the acquisition of the land itself.
Yeah, you're not getting... you're generally not seeing a first-time home buyer lots or homes because land just, frankly, it just costs too much. You have to
Right.
build the biggest house that you can, or the most expensive house you can.
Exactly. So, let's. I'm going to ignore subdividable parcels for right now, and I'm just going to talk about an individual buildable lot. It's what we would call shovel ready. So it's on an improved road. It has the right amount of frontage. It is the appropriate size for the zoning. And so, what are we looking at? That one you would probably just look for comparable sales, right?
Yeah, I mean, just as if you were appraising an improved property, you're generally looking at similar properties that have sold in the neighborhood or the town, and usually in New Hampshire. We're looking at an entire town when we're looking for sales rather than a particular like city neighborhood. But just as the inventory is low with improved properties, it also is very low for raw, unimproved properties. So it's not easy.
No.
And a land located on A Street can be so different from a property located across the street on Z Street, where the topography is different, the views are different, the surrounding houses are different.
Yeah.
Does it have access to public utilities and down the line? So there's just so many factors to consider, and frankly, it is difficult to make adjustments for all those differences.
Yeah, I think with a house we can be a lot more precise about value, and with land we're going to be a little bit less precise. So, if I'm looking at a buildable lot, I'm going to say, what price range house could that neighborhood support?
Right.
And you were talking about something of a land to improvement ratio?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, if you're in a neighborhood of, homes that are generally in the same price range, it might be easier to just say, okay, well, what is the land to value ratio in that neighborhood or that location? I find when I'm doing appraisals in southern New Hampshire, the land to the improved value ratio is usually somewhere in the 35 to 40% range, and it can be higher than that or less than that depending on the situation. But I find that's a good rule of thumb.
All right, so if I can do some round numbers, so I can do the math in my head, if it's $1 million house, then the land would be about $350 or $400.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Right.
And so it's a $500,000 house, then the land would be $175-ish.
Right.
Okay.
It's just a general rule of thumb.
Just a general rule of thumb, exactly. That sounds about right to me. And that, I used to, back in the late 80s, I used to use like 33%. So it sounds like that's not changed an awful lot.
And I mean, Fannie Mae still wants us to comment when the land value is over 30% of the total improved value, even though that just seems like an older, outdated
concept.
No, just the 30% is outdated. They should be upgrading that. Well, not upgrading, updating it to current market conditions. Yeah.
So if I send some land listings to a builder, the very first thing they ask me is, what's the price range I can build a house on in that area? Because some neighborhoods are going to support $350,000, and some are going to support $550,000, and some are going to support $900,000. And so they will pay more for land, and you should pay more for land that you can put a bigger, more expensive house on.
Yeah, and then once they figure that out, they want to know what the price per lot is. And that's where the land to value ratio comes in too. Exactly.
The other thing, while we wait till we go to subdivisions. So the other thing to look at is, so if you know your end use of what you're looking to build, what are some of the other costs associated with it? Do you need to have it surveyed? Do you need to have it cleared? A surveyor is somebody who goes out and marks the lot and tells you where the lot lines are, where the wetlands are, where the building envelope is. This is stuff that we talked about in the previous episode, which was about evaluating land for sale. Do you need to put in a road or make improvements to the road in order to have it be a buildable lot? Do you need to have engineering done? Do you need to have engineering done that shows how you're going to handle drainage and where your driveway is going to be? Do you need to have a septic design done? Your excavation and site work. Do you need to have a power line brought in, either underground or a telephone pole? I guess
Sure.
a power pole, yeah.
Well, I think in most cases, if you're looking at a modern subdivision where there's been
Right.
a subdivision road put in, most of that stuff's going to be done for you, or
Most of that stuff's done
it's
for you.
already going to
Yeah.
be done. So if you're looking on lots on a country road or something, then it becomes more important to know, what the cost of the utilities are, and lots of these lots will also have the percolation tests,
Yep.
so
Yep.
to determine what the soil is, so that where the septic can go, and then you also have to consider, the well and the septic have to be a certain distance apart.
Right.
So that all affects the overall utility of the lot.
Exactly. So on a country road, there might already be power on the street, but there's not power brought to this lot. And so you will be paying for the electrical line to be brought to the lot, at the street, and then brought to the house. And the same thing with the cable. And generally speaking, even if it is overhead power lines, they're going to require you to do underground conduits, which is great. I mean, in the wintertime, certainly we like to have as much of that underground as possible. But it's extremely expensive because the conduits that are being required are usually a lot bigger than what is actually needed right now, but they're thinking towards the future. So they're like, we want you to upgrade what you're doing now because it's going to make life easier for us in the future. So that can get expensive.
Sure.
And it's just the type of thing that you want to be looking at, because if I'm comparing two different parcels, I want to compare apples to apples. And it's not just about the list price or the purchase price of the property. It's about what you have to do to get it ready. And then there may or may not be some current use taxes or impact fees. Certainly there's always fees when you pull a building permit. The other thing to look at is in some towns, if you are going to build, you need to put in a sprinkler system. And if you are on a well, as most of our communities are, then that means you have to have this big, huge tank of water. I've gotten some ballpark figures from some builders that installing the whole house automatic sprinkler system and that big reserve tank of water is about a $10,000 addition to the cost of building the property.
Right.
So if you're looking at lots in two different towns and one of them requires that and one of them doesn't, that's a consideration. If there was a fire in your house, you definitely would prefer to have the automatic sprinkler system, and you will get a discount usually on your homeowner's insurance. But you need to think about this.
Right.
These are questions to ask.
And just so you know, those systems are built and designed so that if you have a fire just in the kitchen, only that sprinkler is going to go off in the kitchen. It's not like all the sprinklers in the entire house are going to go off and damage your whole house.
Yeah.
So just something to keep in mind.
And the reason why they have the big tank reservoir of water is that if there's a fire in your house, your electric system should shut down, and therefore your well pump is not going to be able to pump water to the sprinkler system. So you need to have a quantity of water that is always there, ready for that. The other thing I would look at is if you've got wetlands on the property, you may be required to do special things with your drainage and with your driveway, with your foundation work. You may have to, if you're going to impact wetland in one area of the lot, you may need to create more wetlands in another part of the lot. So the cost of the lot is not just the price of the lot.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, there are going to be some lots that just aren't buildable because of the amount of wetlands or where they're located.
Absolutely, yeah.
The cost to be
it might be a conforming lot as far as zoning goes,
sure,
but there's not enough space to put an actual property. Because you got to consider
setbacks and where the well's going to go and where the septic's going to go.
And if it's a non-conforming lot, then you may have to go for a variance. So perhaps the zoning says you need a minimum of 2 acres and you have 1.75 acres. But in all other ways, it conforms to the zoning. Well, then you're going to go to the appeal board or the planning board and try to get a variance or an exception. And that means you've hired engineers, surveyors, and attorneys to do that. And it means you've got a couple of months that you're going to go through the whole process, and then probably a 30-day appeal period after a decision has been made for your neighbors to appeal if they feel that it was not done properly. When you go for a variance, you need to show a reason for it. You need to show some sort of a reason. Yeah. There's usually like a list of 4 or 5 criteria that the town gives you. Brian, next I'm going to talk about subdivisions and raw land and larger parcels. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask you about the market and where, how things are year to date. Where are we at? Yeah. Well, so how's the market?
We're now in September 2020. I do have the August figures here from New Hampshire Association of Realtors for August 2020. And it's a little surprising data here, but so the 1 year change in single family closed sales is about 1.5%. Which you can understand because the inventories have been way down.
Right. So that's just the number of houses that have transacted.
Exactly.
So COVID aside, we're pretty much even with last year.
Correct.
Okay.
This is really enlightening, though. The 1 year change in single family medium sales price is 15% over August of last year.
Wow.
Which with COVID and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. So prices are up as we've suspected.
You have the low inventory, you have the record low mortgage rates, and that equals, it's going to be a strong fall market. It's going to continue.
Yeah.
And as we've seen in recent weeks, it doesn't seem like that. Sometimes you normally get a slowdown in September after the beginning of the, Labor Day and schools in session. Usually get a slowdown, but
no, my phone is ringing.
We're not seeing that at all. So I just think that I think prices are going to continue to rise here for the short term anyway.
Yeah, I think so too.
As long as mortgage rates stay where they are,
and as long as inventory stays low.
Exactly.
Yeah. When I do just about any property that I look at, I do some quick math in my head of what I think the mortgage payment is going to be, and the mortgage payments are lower than the rents right now.
Oh yeah. I mean, even though prices are at all-time highs,
the interest rates are keeping it so affordable.
It still makes sense to buy rather than rent.
Right.
In most situations.
In most situations. The thing is, though, with the low interest rates and the high prices, it's the down payment, it's the cash up front.
Sure.
So
you have to have a steady job. You have to.
You have to be very secure in your employment. Yeah.
Exactly, which isn't the case for a lot of people these days. So
no.
Changes are going to come.
We saw some stats. I saw some stats yesterday from Gary Keller, who's one of the founders of Keller Williams Realty, that showed in the service, hospitality, tourism sector, the unemployment rate is over 30%, which is just staggering. And
the other stat that I saw last month, I believe it was 30% of the American public had not made either a mortgage payment or a rent payment in June.
Wow. Yeah.
So that number is just staggering to me.
That is. So yeah. And so even though there are other sectors that have been secure in their employment and secure in their income, I don't think there's any way you can have part of the organism be that sick, if I want to use the metaphor of an organism, and not affect the health of the rest of it. You know what I mean? So we're being cautious as we look towards next year.
Sure.
But I still believe in my heart that there is pent up supply that has not hit the market, that needs to hit the market eventually.
I agree.
Yeah. So, one of the other questions that we get a lot from both buyers and sellers and other realtors is, hey, what's the cost what's the cost per acre? I've got 10 acres, so surely you can tell me the cost per acre.
Oh, it's $100,000 an acre.
Or this is 20 acres, is it 10,000 an acre or whatever?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I find when I'm doing appraisals and when I talk to builders, they're looking more at what is it per lot?
Right.
What's the cost or price per lot?
Right.
I mean, that's what it ultimately comes down to, because then you have all those factors that we were talking about before, as far as wetlands, topography, and all that affects, what your usable acreage is.
Mm-hmm.
How much frontage and all that. So I think the price per acre, I think you can use that as a rule of thumb when you're doing extremely large raw parcels, maybe a couple hundred acres or so, or even more, thousands of acres. Then maybe you're getting into a price per acre situation. But when you're dealing with smaller parcels that we are, I think you're looking at price per lot.
Yeah, so raw land refers to land that has not been subdivided or developed into buildable lots yet. And so those are usually larger parcels. To me, price per acre is like saying, let's average the temperature for the last 365 days into one number. It's completely meaningless.
Right.
Okay. Yes, it's a number, but it's not really telling you anything. And but cost per lot is super important. If I have a 20-acre parcel and I can get 10 lots out of it, it's worth more than if I can get 3 lots out of it, which is worth more than if it's just one estate lot.
Sure.
How many houses can you put on it? Okay. Can you put duplexes on it? Can you put condos on it? The more units that you can put on it, the more the land is worth.
But even if you're talking about a single family home lot, you could have a 10-acre lot versus a 3-acre lot that could be worth the same.
Right.
Maybe that 10-acre lot consists of, irregular shaped backland that's just completely wooded and
Absolutely.
not considered usable, or it could be all wetlands.
Yeah.
So that's, again, the price per lot is really the factor.
And just about any time that you see a house on an oversized lot, it's because that backland is pretty wet, and it just ended up with that parcel.
I mean, it does offer a buffer from whatever is ultimately behind that lot.
Right.
So,
but we're not farming. It's not like we're going to yield so many crops because we have additional acres. Of course, valuing a farm,
excess land.
Valuing a farm would be a whole different thing.
Sure.
Yeah, but we're talking about house lots here. So the other thing with raw land is, what are your costs to get it approved? How many years is it going to take you to get this through state and local approvals?
Years?
Well, if you're doing a large subdivision, okay. How much are you going to pay for attorneys, surveyors, et cetera? What are you going to pay for road costs? Usually for just like quick back of the napkin numbers, what we will do on a large parcel, if we're talking to a builder or developer, is we'll say, hey, here's this land, here's the topography, here's the wetlands. So we think in order to yield 9 lots, you're going to need 1,500 feet of road frontage. And then they take a look and they calculate out what it costs.
No, that's not going to work.
Exactly. They're going to calculate out what it costs them to put the road in, and they're going to go, that's going to be.
Let's find something else.
That's going to be $90,000 per lot just for the road, and I haven't added in any of my other costs or the fact that I'm going to be carrying this for a couple of years before I can even put a shovel in it. That's number one. Number two is, what's the absorption rate? How many houses in that price range that we're projecting am I going to be able to sell per year in that area?
Which is so hard to forecast,
Exactly.
What's the economy going to be like next year?
Yeah, I mean,
what's the demand going to be?
Developers take big risks, and I know it's seen as very profitable, and it should be profitable for that type of risk, because usually they are acquiring land and going through the whole approval process and putting in the road during one whole market cycle, and by the time they put a for sale sign up, they're in a whole different real estate market than where they started. So they may have been projected that they were going to be selling houses for $400, but now they can sell houses for $550, or they may have been projecting they can sell houses for $600, and now they can sell them for $400.
Or they may have been projecting 12 sales a year, but now they can only sell 3 a year.
Exactly. And
Don't make me start feeling bad for developers.
I know.
Right? Don't start.
I'm so sorry. I do apologize for that. But there's a lot that goes into it, and the towns And the state, boy, they are, I hate to say this because I'm usually not anti-regulation, but there's a lot of stuff that's being put onto the developer. They need to build the road. They need to put in the curbs. They need to put in the sidewalks. They need to put in the fire ponds or cisterns or whatever they need to do. And then they're going to turn all of that over to the town. So when I was young and naive, I always thought the towns built the roads. But no, it's the developers who build them. And then the towns maintain them.
And the town's going to tell them how to do it.
And the town's going to tell them how to do it. And if they want a Taj Mahal road, and it's legal for them to extract that out of the developer, they will.
Yep.
And that just gets passed on to the cost of the lot. So when we talk about building affordable housing, I don't see how it's possible.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so they're not going to be putting up a $300,000 house.
Right, right. You know, everybody talks about we need more affordable housing, but there's not a mechanism for it to be done. And
well, there is some workforce housing and whatnot, programs like that, but not a lot.
Right. So there may be a set aside where the town says, all right, you know, you're going to build 20 houses and we want you to set aside 2 that need to be for people who qualify for affordable housing. Great. Well, where do you think that cost got passed on to? It got passed on to the other 18.
Sure.
So it just inflated the prices in general. And we're seeing, particularly as we get closer to the Boston area, where there's not land available, that the affordable housing is being torn down and then replaced with bigger houses. So supply and demand.
But we also have a recent situation where a lot of people are now thinking about moving away from the city.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
well, there's always been a migration.
well, it's true. It's true.
From the Boston area into New Hampshire. And I only saw the reverse migration for a couple of years when gas prices were really high and prices had dropped in real estate. So then people decided they'd cut their commute and go a little bit closer. But other than that, the majority of my career, everybody's been migrating north.
And, let's face it, our general area of, southern New Hampshire and northern Massachusetts just doesn't have a great
right.
transportation system, public transportation. So
Yeah.
we rely on our cars.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, so valuing a large lot is tough, and that's one where I might need to back out. How many buildable lots do I think we're going to get? What's a buildable lot worth? What's it going to cost to get there? And then back out. I had a listing several years ago that was, I think it was 100 acres, and it had been in the same family since the land was granted from the King of England. So prior to the Revolutionary War. And they had made it, into about a third of it was all cleared in pasture. And it takes decades to do that. And you couldn't make pastures like that today because they did things like fill in wetlands and dredge.
Oh, right.
There were no rules at that time and over the hundreds of years that this happened. So for that particular lot, the conceptual that the engineer came up with was only going to yield, I think, 10 lots. And they would have been worth, in that small town, they would have been worth about maybe 60 apiece. And it was going to cost more than that per lot for the road, which meant the land that had been there for generations and worked and was so lovely was really worth nothing. Unless you left it the way that it was and had somebody grow hay on it.
An estate lot, though.
An estate lot, and you have somebody grow hay and they
Sure.
come and take it.
Yep.
So, so the reason why land is so expensive is, because of the fact that in order to get it from the raw state to the buildable lot is pretty expensive. And then, of course, the fact that people are looking for lots and there's always demand for it.
Right, and we're not building anymore.
We're
We're subdividing some. But
Yes, exactly. We're not making any more. So anything that I missed, Brian?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. So that's the scoop on how to value land. And we thank you for joining us today on Spouses Talking Houses and getting real about real estate. I ask you to like, subscribe, and please share the podcast with any friends, neighbors, frenemies, your mailman, your dog walker. Spread the word. Thanks so much.
music courtesy of the Eric Lindbergh Trio. Please visit his website at www.ericlindberghworld.com. Jennifer and Brian are licensed to practice real estate in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Brian is also a certified general appraiser in New Hampshire. They are not lawyers, accountants, home inspectors, or therapists. Real estate customs and rules may be different in your area. Each Keller Williams Realty office is independently owned and operated. The realtor name is trademarked to members of the National Association of Realtors. If you are currently under contract with a real estate agent, this is not intended as a solicitation. Views expressed on this podcast by Jennifer may not be shared by Brian and vice versa, nor are they necessarily the views of Keller Williams Realty.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21, Podcast Café, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.